stand by, stand by. Watch your crossfire, gentlemen, watch your crossfire. Yeah, man, the day before I got traffic stop. Fire, guys.
Traffic stop just north of Main, information, crossfire, be aware. Best vehicle advising crossfire, be aware.
And AT&T, we got ample units approaching stop traffic.
Full units approaching vehicle.
Southbound, north of Main Street, stop traffic. Tell with the juvie, are you see code 4? Is she hit at all?
That one went down.
That's the juvie.
This is advising no movement inside of the vehicle. Information, this is advising no movement inside the vehicle. What's the best 20?
Southbound, south of Main.
15 on the freeway.
We have one with the
1 mile. 328. I copy me and I just...
May the 20th, 2010 started out like any other day. Two veterans of our West Memphis, Arkansas Police Department, Bill Evans and Brandon Powers, were patrolling the interstate as part of the department's drug interdiction team, something they love to do. They became involved in what seemed to be a routine traffic stop, though I've always warned my officers there is no such thing. But really, how much more routine can you get than pulling over a father and son in what looked like a church bus? My men didn't realize who or what they were dealing with. Neither officer made it home. And one of them was my son. I'm Bob Powder, Chief of the West Memphis Police Department. My officers, Bill and my son Brandon, didn't realize that there are people at war with this country that are not international terrorists. They are seemingly ordinary people, just like you and me, but they don't recognize the federal government's authority to impose laws or taxes on them. They're known as sovereign citizens. Their beliefs may sound so out there that they appear comical or crazy, but don't discount or ignore these people because they're willing to kill and be killed for these beliefs. We as law enforcement officers need to recognize this very real threat so we can protect ourselves. And maybe if Brandon and Bill had been able to recognize the warning signs of sovereign beliefs, they'd be alive today.
In 1995, 168 men, women, and children were killed in the worst domestic terrorist attack on American soil in our nation's history. Aimed at the federal government and law enforcement, the bombing in Oklahoma City was the horrific symbol of the wave of anti-government sentiment that swept across the country in the 1990s. I'm retired ATF Special Agent in Charge, James Cavanaugh. I spent more than 30 years at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and I was there at the beginning of the so-called Patriot movement. I watched in 1992 as the standoff between law enforcement and a white separatist, Randy Weaver, in Ruby Ridge, Idaho, ended with the deaths of a federal marshal and Weaver's wife and son. I was there in the shootout the next year when David Koresh and more than 70 of his followers, along with 4 ATF agents, died in a fiery siege near Waco, Texas. What we didn't understand at first was that these events were a catalyst for the growth of a radical anti-government movement, a catalyst for the birth of armed militias. At its height, there were more than 800 of these anti-government groups throughout the country. Some were part of what is called the sovereign citizen movement. They believe the government has no right to tax or impose laws on them. Following law enforcement crackdowns after Oklahoma City, many anti-government groups disappeared. But the threat from hardcore elements of the radical right continued to simmer. In fact, between the Oklahoma City bombing and the recent West Memphis shootings, approximately 30 law enforcement officers lost their lives to homegrown extremists. 2 officers were killed in Abbeville, South Carolina in 2003, for example, by extremists who did not believe the government had any right to use a tiny portion of their land to widen the public road. Today, the threat of radical right violence against police officers has escalated because the radical anti-government movement has swelled once again. Jerry and Joe Kane, the father and son who were involved in the murders of the 2 officers in West Memphis, traveled around the country giving seminars on how to supposedly circumvent the legal system.
So what we're after here is not fighting, it's conquering.
Right.
I don't want to have to kill anybody. But if they keep messing with me, that's what it's going to have to come out. That's what it's going to come down to, is I'm going to have to kill, and if I have to kill one, then I'm not going to be able to stop. I just know it. I mean, I have an addictive.
Along with physical confrontations, sovereigns also practice a form of harassment and intimidation, often referred to as paper terrorism. They file bogus claims or liens against officers, prosecutors, or judges that can be difficult to get removed from court records. In 2010 alone, sovereign citizens have filed liens, cease and desist orders, and documents called letters of marque, or truth affidavits, against officers and agencies across the country. The following are some indicators that you as an officer need to be aware of to protect yourself. They are signs that the person you've encountered considers himself to be a sovereign citizen who is immune from the law. The first thing that any officer notices at a traffic stop is the vehicle's license plate. If you try to call in many sovereign plates, you'll find no record of them, and for good reason. They're either homemade or professionally produced fakes. They may display the names of strange nations, embassies, or tribes. They may refer to the Uniform Commercial Code or the Constitution. Bumper stickers are another easily visible sign of sovereign beliefs. One that reads posse comitatus, which is Latin for power or force of the county, means the driver believes county officials, such as sheriffs, are the highest level of law enforcement, and that the federal government and its officers don't have any legal authority. Stickers such as I am an American national or not subject to corporate federal or corporate state jurisdiction are signs that the vehicle's occupants are part of the radical anti-government movement. When asked for their driver's license, vehicle registration, or other identification, sovereigns may show documents that at first might look legitimate, but after a closer inspection are obviously fake. The fake driver's license could have the words, without prejudice, UCC 1-207, a reference to the Uniform Commercial Code. What might look like a real Social Security card to you may actually read, Social Security, Socialism in America, still 100% voluntary, for global domination and slavery, not for identification. Sovereigns often will have unusual responses to routine questions about their identification or license plate. If the officer asks the person's name, a sovereign may respond, I am a free man, traveling upon the land. Or, what authority do you have to question a sovereign? If asked for a driver's license, the person might say, is one required of a sovereign? Or they might ask you for your delegation of authority. If you continue questioning them, they might say, officer, I do not believe I, nor this private vehicle, falls under your jurisdiction. And here is the proof. Then they might show you what appear to be legal documents. Jerry Kane handed West Memphis officers Brandon Powdard and Bill Evans some odd-looking papers. Powdard and Evans didn't recognize the documents or understand what they meant. Many sovereigns sign legal documents in red ink or with a thumbprint in red ink. The subject's name might be in all capital letters or have strange punctuation, such as the first name, then a hyphen, then the middle name, followed by a colon and the last name. Sovereigns believe this type of capitalization and punctuation shows they are immune from government authority. Some sovereigns may record their encounters with police, possibly in an effort to intimidate the officers. They might warn the officer that they are recording the encounter and then say something like, I am reserving all of my common law rights. Some of these recordings showing the officers are then posted on the sovereign's websites. Now you have some knowledge of how sovereigns operate. Form a strategy within your department with your training section, your tactical section, and your commanders, and be prepared to implement that strategy when you encounter sovereigns. Have a procedure where you, your dispatchers, and your colleagues all understand that you're dealing with a sovereign citizen, a person who doesn't believe that you have any authority over him. These tips are only a few of the signs of possible sovereign beliefs. Just recognizing one or two might mean that your workday will end like every other, and you'll get to go home to your family.
Hello? 1-1, where is your emergency? Exit 275 on 40. These guys just shot a police officer right on the exit.
You said an officer's been shot on the 270 what?
Exit 275 on 40.
275 on 40. Where are you right now?
I'm at the exit. They're right in front of me, about 100 feet.
Okay, it's a white what?
It's a white caravan. A white guy. Please hurry. He's like, oh my God! Oh shit! 2 cops are dead. They're all over in the ditch. They're both dead now. They killed both cops. They shot one. He fell in the ditch. The other one ran behind the car, and they shot him in the hand.
Where's the suspect now?
They just left in a white caravan. They went right up the exit. That guy had an automatic weapon. They're all with automatic weapons.
Where are you at now?
I'm sitting right over the top.
What kind of vehicle are you in?
I'm in a FedEx truck. You can't miss it. It's huge. Tell that cop to come forward. He's coming.
A white unmarked possible unit that had shots fired, possibly a white van was going to be the suspect. 615, if you got more traffic, he's direct with me.
Jerry and Joe Kane were finally stopped for good after they killed my son and his partner that day, but not before 2 other courageous officers were injured. We, as law enforcement professionals, face danger every day. We know that's part of our job. Hopefully this video is giving you some new tools to keep yourself safe. No officer should have to die like Brandon and Bill.
The facts are frauds and the dangers of the sovereign citizen movement, Part 2.
The Southern Poverty Law Center began tracking anti-government extremist groups in the mid-90s after a series of events sparked a rise in militia groups throughout the country. Those events were the 1992 siege at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, and the 1993 assault on the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. The movement hit a high point in 1995, when a bomb, planted by Timothy McVeigh, exploded in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. After the bombing, leaders in the anti-government movement made a conscious effort to distance themselves from white supremacy. Some rejected that type of violence, while others feared the racism would make their message less palatable. In reaction to the 9/11 terror attacks, and the U.S. response to them, nativist hate under a thin veil of national security rhetoric has become central to the Patriot movement's ideology. After the election of the first African-American president in 2008, a new wave of anti-government extremism was born, with groups like the Oath Keepers, the 3% movement, and the Lightfoot Militia. During President Barack Obama's second term in 2012, the number of anti-government extremist groups rose to an all-time high of 1,360. Fueled in part by changing demographics, a struggling economy, and the existence of an African-American president. The movement was again in the national spotlight in 2014, when the Oath Keepers, 3%ers, and others supported Nevada cattle rancher Cliven Bundy during his family standoff with the Bureau of Land Management over grazing rights. Members of the Bundy family and their supporters took part in the armed occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in 2016. There, a confrontation with local law enforcement resulted in the death of one of the occupiers. That same year, 3 members of the militia group the Crusaders were arrested in Garden City, Kansas, after the FBI obtained details of a bombing plot aimed at Somali and Muslim communities. The attack was planned to devastate a housing complex with hundreds of residents. Had the FBI not thwarted it, the death toll may have rivaled that of the Oklahoma City bombing. Violent plots, like the one in Garden City, may become more frequent as anti-government extremists continue to use the internet to facilitate.
We're going to
visit Brandon's gravesite. I come up at least once a week. I try to, but every time I go past it, I'll just kind of hit the horn twice. It's just a little thing I do. I let him know I'm thinking about him, but I do come visit with him and spend some time out there, and it's peaceful, it's quiet, and it's beautiful little cemetery. It's a hard story to tell. It's an important message, as I said, and the only way that I can do this is the support I get from the officers that attend the training. They keep in touch with me, they contact me, they say that this training saved my life, and that's what it's about. How many of you had an encounter with a sovereign? A few? Okay. How many have not heard of sovereigns before? Never heard anything about them? Since 2011, of August 2011, I retired from West Memphis Police Department as their chief, and I've gone full-time into educating law enforcement around the country on the dangers of sovereign extremists. Hate law enforcement. We are their enemy, and you have to understand that. A sovereign basically is someone that is against our government, someone that does not believe in paying taxes. They don't think law enforcement has any authority over them. They don't believe in our court system. And they're basically, they would be close to anarchists. They don't want any leaders. They don't want anyone over them but God. So they're totally anti-government. And some of them, not all, are just a serious threat to law enforcement.
Please hurry. Oh my God! Oh shit! 2 cops are dead. The other one's in the ditch. They're both dead now. They killed both cops. They shot one, he fell in the ditch. The other one ran behind the car, and they shot him in the head. All right, where's the suspect now? They just left in a white caravan. They went right up the exit. That guy had an automatic weapon.
It was May the 20th, 2010. I was a police chief in West Memphis. We had an interstate interdiction unit working Interstate 40 for drugs and criminal activity. That day about 11:30, Officer Bill Evans, that was on the interstate unit, stopped a white Dodge van driven by Jerry Kane and a passenger, his son, 16-year-old son, Joe Kane. Within a short time later, Brandon, my son, arrives on the scene as a sergeant. He looks at the paperwork. He has no idea what he's looking at. The video shows that on the dash cam video. He gets the paperwork. He's looking at it. That is a distraction used by sovereigns to distract law enforcement from their traffic stop. And effectively what they're doing is sovereigns are taking over the traffic stop away from the police officer. So Brandon's standing there now looking at it. Bill has Jerry Kane off to the side. The kid, 16-year-old kid in the car, gives a signal to his dad. He pushes Bill Evans. He loses his balance. The door opens on the car, on the van, and Brandon turns his head to see what happened to his partner. And when the door opened and Brandon turns his head, the exact same sequence of frame on the video, the kid gets out with an AK-47 and shoots and kills both officers. Brandon took 14 rounds. Bill took 11 rounds through his vest. I was on the scene shortly. My wife had just had open heart surgery. She's out of the hospital just for a few days. We were coming to Missouri to where we have a home. And we got on the interstate and a call comes out over my radio, officers down. I was within a mile of where it happened. We pull up, tell my wife to stay in the car. And I get out and I see an officer lying in a ditch down below where the police cars are. It was Officer Evans. I look back up the hill and I see one of my sergeants standing there beside the 2 police cars. I go up and the sergeant stops me and says, "Chief, please don't go around there." I pushed him aside I went around the corner of the car and I see Brandon lying there on his back. I'm looking down at him. The back of his head had been shot off. He was covered in blood, and he was lying in all these shell casings. I remember seeing all these shell casings there that he was in. I said, what? And I couldn't figure out what was going on. He had his left hand over on his heart, and his right hand was extended out like this, and his .40 caliber Glock was clutched in his right hand. And I was standing over him trying to sort my thoughts together about what was happening. It was just like it was so surreal, like a nightmare.
The white unmarked possible unit that had shots fired, possibly a white van, was going to be suspect.
That day, that instant that I was standing over Brandon, I lost the passion I had to be in law enforcement. I've been to every state but Hawaii and Alaska, and I've given it hundreds of times. But you need to be as prepared as you can be. We can't bring Brandon and Bill back. They're gone forever. But we can do something for you, and particularly for your families, to keep you alive so they don't suffer like we're suffering every second of every single day. It never goes away. Your life changes forever. I show this right here on the last one of the last slides. Then I show the funeral. I said, this is to show you how that when you go to work, you might not come home. I hope that they see this really and has a visual impact on them that, we need to be careful. Here's 2 experienced officers killed by one 16-year-old kid. And when they see this, and I think it registers to them when they see it that, this is real. This is real stuff.